When people think about history, they usually picture a long chain of dates, places, and famous names. But history, as we might think, is not set in stone. A lot of what we believe about the past comes from evidence, art, interpretation, and theories that can change when something new is found. And here, in this video, we're going to reveal 7 hidden discoveries that changed history. Number 7. The legendary Terracotta Army of China. Well, according to history books, Marco Polo was the first European to make his way into China and return with stories that sounded almost impossible for even medieval Europe to believe. He described a civilization that was richer, more advanced, and far more organized than anything many Europeans had seen. But the discovery of China's Terracotta Army has made that story a little less certain. In March 1974, the farmers digging a well in Shanxi province found fragments of clay that led to one of the most mind-blowing archaeological discoveries in modern history. Buried near the still unopened tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the man who declared himself China's first emperor in 221 BCE, was an underground army unlike anything ever found before. There were thousands of life-size soldiers, horses, and military figures standing for more than 2,000 years. So far, archaeologists have uncovered more than 2,000 warriors, though many experts believe the full site may contain about 8,000 figures spread across hundreds of pits. What makes the find even stranger is how realistic these statues are. Each soldier's face feels different. Each one looks like a person, not a statue, and that has raised one very controversial idea. Some researchers have suggested the statues show signs of Greek artistic influence, since earlier Chinese sculpture was usually far more stylized. What's even more intriguing is that a European DNA sample, which was discovered in the nearby region and dated to the period before the Terracotta Army, hints that someone from Europe may have reached China long before Marco ever did. And that possibility changes every single thing we thought we knew about history. Number 6. The lost golden city of ancient Egypt. Archaeologists, including the famous Zahi Hawass, in 2020 were searching for Tutankhamun's mortuary temple in Luxor. Well, they didn't find what they were looking for, but what they found instead may have been even more shocking. Near ancient Thebes, not far from the Great Nile, then they came across a vast ancient city that had remained hidden for nearly 3,000 years. When the discovery was officially announced in April 2021, it immediately sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. Some people call it Egypt's lost golden city, and some the Egyptian Pompeii. The city was known as Aten, or the Dazzling Aten, and it dates back to the reign of Amenhotep III, who ruled from about 1386 to 1353 BCE. This was one of the richest and most powerful periods in all of ancient Egyptian history. What made Aten so extraordinary was not just how old it was, but how much of it was still there. The city's layout was still pretty clear. Houses, workshops, and streets had not totally vanished with time. In some areas, mud brick walls were still rising close to 3 meters, here including weird zigzag-shaped walls that experts think may have been used for security and organizing movement through the city. And then came the details that made the whole place feel real. Excavators found a large bakery with ovens and storage pottery that may have produced food for workers. They also found a vessel containing dried meat inscribed with the words, Year 37, meat for the 3rd Hebsed festival from the slaughterhouse of the stockyard of Ka, made by Butcher Louis. That one object alone turned this from a ruined city into a living world. More than anything, Aten gave historians a clearer look into the age of Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and one of Egypt's most mysterious royal periods. Number 5. The garden cities of the Amazon. The Amazon was long considered a green desert, inhabited only by small tribes, scary animals, and not much else. But that old idea changed when archaeologists uncovered something rare in Ecuador's Upano Valley at the foothills of the Andes. Hidden under thick forest cover was not one lost city, but an entire network of ancient cities that had been sitting there for around 2,500 years. The discovery was led by French archaeologist Stephen Rostaing of the French National Center for Scientific Research, and it pulled together more than 20 years of research, later expanded using LiDAR mapping. That laser-based scanning technology allowed researchers to see through the dense canopy and reveal what had been invisible from the ground. And what appeared was astonishing. Over 6,000 earthen platforms spread across 15 settlements, all connected by an organized system of roads, plazas, terraces, drainage systems, and farmland. The people living there were active in the region from about 500 BCE to somewhere between 300 and 600 CE. Some settlements were small, but others, like Sangay and Quilamope, were far more developed. In places, archaeologists found domestic floors, hearths, post holes, grinding stones, jars, and burnt seeds, all signs of real daily life. This was not some ceremonial spot. It was a functioning urban world. What makes the discovery even more important is the scale of planning behind it. Some of the roads stretched at least 25 kilometers, and the spaces between settlements were not random forest. They were engineered agricultural fields used to grow beans, maize, and sweet potatoes. And that is what makes this so important and incredible. Number 4. The City of the Sun. Most people usually think Native American history was simple. A few teepees, a few tribes, and that's it. But that version falls apart the second you look at Cahokia. Cahokia in Illinois was one of the largest cities in North America long before Europeans arrived. At its peak, between about 1050 and 1200 AD, it may have held around 20,000 people. That made it bigger than many European cities at the time. This was not some scattered settlement. Cahokia covered around 6 square miles and included plazas, neighborhoods, ceremonial spaces, and about 120 earth mounds. The largest, Monk's Mound, still stands at roughly 100 feet tall and is considered the largest earthen structure in the Western Hemisphere. Millions of cubic feet of earth were carried there by hand, basket by basket. And somehow, when white settlers later came across these mounds, then many still refused to believe Native Americans had built them. Some blamed glaciers, others credited Vikings, Phoenicians, or even the lost tribes of Israel. Basically, they were willing to believe almost anything except the obvious truth. That is what makes Cahokia such a brutal correction to the version of history so many people were taught. It proves Native North America was not empty, primitive, or culturally behind. It was organized, advanced, and capable of building cities on a scale most people still do not associate with this continent. Today, only about 70 of the original 120 mounds remain, and a 4-lane highway cuts right through the site. Number 3. White Sands Fossil Footprints. In school, we were taught that humans reached the Americas around 13,500 to 15,000 years ago. That timeline held for a long time, until White Sands National Park in New Mexico forced archaeologists to look again. In 2009, researchers found a set of fossilized human footprints preserved in ancient sediment, and they were not just old. Well, they were shockingly old. The tracks were found in what used to be the shoreline of Lake Otero, a huge Ice Age lake that once filled the Tularosa Basin. Back then, White Sands did not look like a desert at all. It was a wet, grassy landscape where humans moved alongside Columbian mammoths, ancient camels, dire wolves, and Harlan's ground sloths. At first, the discovery was somewhat super controversial. The footprints themselves were clearly real, but when seeds found above and below them were radiocarbon dated, the results came back at roughly 21,000 to 23,000 years old. When that pushed human presence in the Americas back by nearly 10,000 years, and a lot of experts were not ready to accept that. Some argued the dates may have been thrown off by contamination or the reservoir effect. But in 2023, another study using pollen backed up the earlier dating and verified the footprints really were that old. And that changed everything. Because once those dates held, the old migration story no longer worked the way we were taught. Humans were already here, living in North America during the height of the Ice Age, far earlier than anyone had believed. Number 2, the ancient Egyptian Rosetta Stone. Well, you've probably heard of the Rosetta Stone, and let's say, without it, we would still know ancient Egypt mostly through statues, tombs, and guesses. Before it was found, people could look at hieroglyphs, but they could not actually read them. The symbols were beautiful and totally silent. But that changed in July 1799, when French soldiers working near the Egyptian town of Rosetta, now called Rashid, uncovered a broken black stone slab while rebuilding a fort during Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign. The officer who recognized its importance was Pierre-François Bouchard. What they had found was part of a larger stela, and it carried the same official decree written in 3 scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Ancient Greek. The decree itself dates to 196 BC and marked the first anniversary of the coronation of Ptolemy V, who ruled from 204 to 181 BC. It was basically a political and religious statement issued by priests in Memphis, confirming the young king's divine authority. On its own, and that would already make it historically important. But what actually made it world-changing was the Greeks. Because scholars could still read ancient Greek, they finally had a way to compare the same text across all 3 writing systems. The English scholar Thomas Young helped identify that some hieroglyphs represented sounds, especially royal names like Ptolemy. But the real breakthrough came in 1822, when Jean-François Champollion proved that hieroglyphs were not just sacred symbols or decorative pictures. They were part of a real written language. So, in simple words, this stone unlocked thousands of years of lost Egyptian history and meaning. Number 1, the Cave of the Swimmers. Now, this discovery changed not only human history as we knew it, but also Earth's climate history. Back in 1933, a Hungarian explorer named Laszlo Almasi was traveling through a remote stretch of desert near the border of Egypt and Libya when he found something that should not have been there. Inside a cave, painted across the rock walls, were scenes of human figures with their arms and legs spread out, surrounded by animals like giraffes and hippos. At first, those human figures looked like they were floating through the air, but they were not flying. They were swimming. Well, yes. And that is where the whole thing became unsettling. Because nobody swims in the middle of the Sahara. Not now, or not in the world we know. But these paintings were not symbolic nonsense. They were showing a real environment that once existed. The people who made them were painting what they actually saw around them. That meant one thing. The Sahara had not always been a dead ocean of sand. For a huge stretch of time, from around 14,600 years ago until roughly 5,500 years ago, large parts of it were green, wet, and full of life. There were lakes, grasslands, and enough water to support both humans and large animals. What do you think about these discoveries? Well, let us know. And with it, that's all from us. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you very soon in the next one.